Hello friends, in this video we will be extracting pure silicon dioxide from sand. Materials required for this synthesis include, of course, sand, sodium hydroxide 50 grams, 300 milliliters of distilled water, 50 milliliters of 3 molar hydrochloric acid and 30 milliliters of 98% sulfuric acid. So yeah, basically I went to the beach last day, so I collected some 500 grams of sand from there. The sand I collected was more of coarse type and had a lot of organic matter like leaves. So I had to first wash the sand with plain water to remove all the organic and other suspended particles. Then I added 50 milliliters of 3 molar hydrochloric acid to remove all the soluble impurities, mainly calcium carbonate. In anticipation of too much fizzing and bubbling, initially I added few ml of hydrochloric acid, but to my surprise the sand I collected had very few carbonates, so I decided to add all the acid at once. You can see few bubbling here and there, but as a whole it was much purer. I swirled the flask for 5 to 10 minutes to ensure complete reaction. Then I decanted off the acid and washed the sand a couple of number of times with water to remove all the acid. Then I decided to dry the sand, so I transferred it onto a petri plate and let it outside in the sun to dry. This is the much purer sand I got after washing and drying. You can see some black and brown particles here and there, but more than that there are colorless crystals which are all silica particles which we will be extracting. Now transfer this dry sand into a stainless steel vessel and start heating. Add pre-weighed 50 grams of sodium hydroxide into it. My sodium hydroxide was a little damp and too much clumps were present, so I had to break them up for even transfer of heat. For this step, don't use a glass vessel or a glass stir rod because you know that hot molten alkalis and glass not a good combination. What's happening here is sodium hydroxide reacts with silicon dioxide in sand to form sodium silicate. After about 5 minutes you can see a lot of water because my sodium hydroxide was damp. After about 20 minutes of heating, you can see that most of the water has evaporated off and the reaction has finally started to set in. Stir the mixture continuously throughout the heating process. I am using a stainless steel spatula for stirring. By about 40 minutes, the reaction is almost getting into completion and mixture is getting very thick now. Then I took it from the heat source and immediately transferred it onto a piece of wood. Do this step very fast or it will be very difficult later. Then I transferred the crude sodium silicate into a porcelain mortar and added 300 milliliters of distilled water in small additions with constant stirring. Try to dissolve as much as sodium silicate you can. Finally, we are left with a turbid yellow solution which I had to decant from the porcelain mortar, which is the sodium silicate solution now. In the mortar you can see some unreacted sand particles. Then I filtered this solution of sodium silicate using gravity filtration method and then started adding concentrated sulfuric acid drop by drop into it with stirring. I had to add 30 milliliters of 98% sulfuric acid. On adding the acid you can hear this characteristic sound. Concentrated acid-alkali reaction is extremely exothermic, so we have to be very careful. After some time, silicic acid crashes out as a white precipitate. You won't be seeing this precipitate immediately on adding the sulfuric acid, but after some time you can see that. After all the sulfuric acid is added, filter the solution. I am just using a 2 cotton cloth to filter out the silicic acid as the precipitate is extremely slimy and it will be very difficult for simple gravity filtration. Vacuum filtration method is best if you have one. Finally, we get the white slimy precipitate of silicic acid. The next step is to heat this silicic acid to high temperature. I am using a clay tile over an open Bunsen burner flame. I placed the silicic acid particles on it and heated it to very high temperatures. I could virtually see the red hot tile. What's happening here is silicic acid is getting decomposed by heat to silicon dioxide. I heated it for about 1 hour and then pulverized the mixture with the help of a pestle. After that, I transferred all this silicon dioxide powder into a mortar and pestle and thoroughly grinded it into fine particles. After making it into a fine powder, I stored it in an airtight container and labeled it. I would like to take this opportunity to thank my Patreon supporters who have financially supported me so that I could get the materials required for doing all these experiments, including this one. Thank you. Thank you so much for watching my video. If you loved the contents of this video, do subscribe to my channel and click on the bell button so that you will get notified about my new videos.